During World War II, Hollywood and the U.S. government often joined forces to craft stirring, patriotic films that aimed to rally the American public, boost morale, and support the war effort. The Fighting Seabees, released in 1944 by Republic Pictures and starring John Wayne, is a perfect example of that collaboration. It's a film that glorifies the wartime contributions of the U.S. Navy's construction battalions, better known as the Seabees, who were responsible for building airstrips, bases, and infrastructure in war zones across the Pacific. But this film isn't just a celebration of hard hats and bulldozers. It's also a love story, an action-packed battle saga, and a propaganda piece rolled into one. Let's break it all down: the story, the themes, the performances, and why The Fighting Seabees remains a unique entry in the pantheon of World War II cinema. By 1944, the war in the Pacific was raging. The United States was deeply engaged in brutal island-hopping campaigns, fighting Japanese forces across remote islands from Guadalcanal to the Marianas. Military planners quickly realized that defeating Japan wasn't just about infantry and aircraft, it was also about logistics. Airfields had to be carved out of jungle, harbors needed piers, supply depots, barracks, fuel tanks, and roads had to be constructed in dangerous, often bombarded environments. Enter the Seabees, the U.S. Navy's solution to a unique problem. Civilian contractors had been working on military construction projects early in the war, but they weren't allowed to fight back under the Geneva Convention. So in 1942, the Navy created the construction battalions, recruiting skilled tradesmen from the civilian sector and giving them military training. The Seabees could build and fight, combat engineers who used bulldozers by day and rifles by night. Hollywood seized on this compelling story. The Seabees weren't traditional warriors, but they were just as essential to victory. And what better man to portray their rough-and-tumble spirit than John Wayne? The Fighting Seabees centers on Wedge Donovan, played by John Wayne, a gruff, hot-headed civilian contractor, working in the Pacific who oversees a crew building vital airstrips and military installations under increasingly dangerous conditions. His men are unarmed and untrained in combat, but Japanese attacks on their sites are becoming more frequent and deadly. Donovan is frustrated. He wants his men to be armed. He argues that they should be allowed to fight back. The Navy, however, pushes back. Military policy insists that civilians can't bear arms or be involved in combat. If they want to fight, they have to enlist and become part of the armed services. Wedge's solution? He spearheads the creation of a new kind of unit, trained construction workers who are also naval personnel, what will eventually become the Seabees. With the help of Navy Commander Bob Yarrow, played by Dennis O'Keefe, and some political maneuvering in Washington, the plan moves forward. But there's a personal complication. Both Wedge and Yarrow are in love with the same woman, journalist Constance Chesley, played by Susan Hayward. Constance is an assertive war correspondent, one of the few female characters in the film and a symbol of modern American womanhood. Her love triangle with the two men adds a dramatic edge to the otherwise masculine story. As the war intensifies, Wedge leads his newly formed Seabee unit into action, but his aggressive and emotional leadership style ultimately leads to tragedy. In a climactic battle scene, Wedge sacrifices himself to destroy a hidden Japanese fuel dump, ensuring the safety of the American forces and finally proving the value of the Seabees in the war effort. This is vintage John Wayne, a no-nonsense, hard-charging alpha male who's not afraid to get his hands dirty. But unlike some of his later, more polished military roles, Wedge Donovan is a more flawed and emotionally volatile character. He's impatient, quick to anger, and sometimes reckless. He represents the rough civilian contractor who has to learn discipline and chain of command. Wayne plays Wedge with a swagger that commands the screen, but there's also a tragic dimension to the character. His inability to compromise, whether with Navy regulations or matters of the heart, leads to his downfall. In that way, the film gives Wayne an unusually layered role, especially for a wartime propaganda piece. While The Fighting Seabees is filled with explosions, bulldozers, and combat sequences, it also tries to squeeze in a romance subplot. Susan Hayward's Constance Chesley is a war correspondent covering the front lines. She's more independent and assertive than the typical 1940s female lead, which makes her a worthy rival for the affections of both Wedge and Commander Yarrow. The love triangle adds a softer emotional undercurrent to the film, although it sometimes feels like a distraction from the action. Still, Hayward holds her own in scenes dominated by Wayne's towering screen presence. Her character doesn't just exist to be rescued. She has opinions, agency, and a career of her own. That said, the romance doesn't get a lot of time to breathe. It's mainly used as a dramatic counterweight to the escalating violence. For a film made in 1944 by Republic Pictures, a studio known more for westerns and serials than big-budget epics, The Fighting Seabees boasts impressive action sequences. The battle scenes are tightly choreographed and surprisingly violent for the era. We see Japanese snipers ambushing work crews, air raids on construction sites, and a large-scale battle at the climax involving tanks, flamethrowers, and hand-to-hand combat. The film makes it clear that the Seabees are not just behind-the-scenes builders. They're on the front lines, facing the same dangers as infantrymen. And when it comes time to fight, they fight with grit and fury. Of course, there's a healthy dose of wartime stereotyping. The Japanese are portrayed as sneaky and treacherous, often attacking under the cover of night. These portrayals reflect the era's racialized view of the enemy, and were part of broader propaganda efforts to demonize Japan. It's uncomfortable by modern standards, but typical of wartime cinema. The Fighting Seabees is more than just an action movie. It's a patriotic call to arms. It tells the American public that everyone has a role to play in defeating the Axis powers. You don't have to be a soldier storming the beaches. You can be a welder, a carpenter, a crane operator, and still make a difference. The film's central message is about unity between civilians and the military. Wedge Donovan starts off as a rogue contractor who doesn't want to play by Navy rules. But by the end of the film, he's integrated into the structure of the armed forces and sacrifices himself for the greater good. It's a classic arc of redemption, underscoring the need for discipline, cooperation, and selflessness in times of war. There's also a critique of unchecked masculinity. Wedge is strong and capable, but his pride and stubbornness cause unnecessary deaths. It's only through humility and ultimate sacrifice that he redeems himself. That's a surprisingly complex message for a film that could have just been a flag-waving celebration. Like many war films of the 1940s, The Fighting Seabees had a very clear agenda. It was designed to educate the public about the Seabees, promote enlistment, and justify their unique role in the military. It was released at a time when morale was crucial. American casualties were rising and the war seemed far from over. The film serves as a piece of wartime propaganda, but not in a sinister way. It doesn't just glorify battle, it shows the cost of arrogance and the importance of teamwork. It presents the Seabees as unsung heroes, not glamorous or celebrated, but vital to victory. For a wartime film shot in black and white, The Fighting Seabees makes the most of its budget. There are some impressive miniature effects and large-scale battle sequences. The use of bulldozers, cranes, and construction gear in combat gives the film a unique visual identity. This isn't just another infantry story, it's about the infrastructure of war, the backstage that makes the front lines possible. Director Edward Ludwig, who had worked on several genre films before this, keeps the pace brisk and the tone patriotic. The score, the sound design, and the pacing all work to keep the audience engaged while driving home the larger message. The Fighting Seabees was a box office success upon release, and remains one of the few World War II films that focuses on construction battalions rather than combat units. It gave visibility to the Seabees at a time when the American public knew little about them. For many people, this film was their first introduction to the idea that war is won not just by shooting, but by building. It also helped further cement John Wayne's status as a wartime hero in Hollywood. Though Wayne himself never served in the military, he played countless servicemen during the war, becoming a symbol of American masculinity and perseverance. Today, the film is remembered fondly by fans of classic war cinema. It's often shown during Seabee commemorations and holds historical interest as both a Hollywood war film and a propaganda tool. The Fighting Seabees is many things: a love story, a war epic, a propaganda piece, and a character study. It's patriotic, but not blindly so. It celebrates sacrifice, but also critiques ego. And above all, it shines a light on one of the war's most overlooked groups, the construction crews who built the runways, depots, and bases that made victory possible. While some of its portrayals are dated, the film's core message remains relevant, that behind every battlefield triumph is a legion of hardworking, unsung heroes. And in celebrating them, The Fighting Seabees carves out its own legacy in the annals of World War II cinema.